Riot Chapter 16. Brian parked his bike in the garage next to his dad's truck and stepped over a small puddle of oil. What was he going to say to his father? How could he ever talk to him? He stopped by the door, heart racing. He walked over the dirty welcome mat and stepped inside. Brian? Mom walked in the kitchen, a textbook in her hand, her eyelids puffy. Brian, you didn't call. Been worried sick. Brian kicked off his shoes and put them next to his father's boots. The television hummed downstairs. Where's Dad? He whispered. Mom's lips drew a pencil-straight line. Beneath her gray sweatshirt, her chest rose slowly and fell. Well, he came home about an hour ago, she said, her voice wielding a steel edge. He's sleeping now. She walked to the kitchen window. Where's that stupid dog? I let him out, and now he's gone. It wasn't like Mom to call Gretzky stupid. Brian glanced at the clock on the stove. Dad's sleeping, but it's only 5:30. He was exhausted, she said, not looking at Brian. I don't think he slept in days. Where are the twins? Brian asked. His stomach grumbled as he reached for the blue speckled cookie jar. He lifted the lid and looked inside. Empty. They're staying overnight in Grandpa and Grandma's. I just don't know what to expect around here. I'm sure by now you've heard about the town, and a high-pitched yelp came from the backyard. Brian started and then sprang into the sliding doors just in time to see a black and white striped creature, its fluffy tail flagged high, waddled slowly away from Gretzky and disappeared through the aspen woods. Gretzky dropped to his forelegs with his head to the ground. He batted his snout, yelping. Gretzky got sprayed by a skunk, Brian shouted. Skunk? Oh, great, Mom said, looking out the window above the kitchen sink. Brian thrust open the sliding door. A pungent, putrid blast of air covered him in a sheet of heavy oil, filling up his eyes and nose and his stomach. He wanted to throw up. Gretzky ran circles in the grass, stopping every few feet to paw his muzzle. Brian wanted to help him, but what could he do? He stood there. Brian, close the door, Mom yelled, her voice piercing. Now the house reeks. If that stupid dog had listened, it wouldn't have happened. A skunk. Terrific. That's just terrific. Mom turned from the window. He's out of this house for good. I've had it. Mom, but it's not his fault, Brian shouted back, his eyes watering. He didn't know better. He probably thought it was one of the twins' stuffed animals again. Gretzky scratched at the glass door. Brian glanced down at the dark, round, pleading eyes looking at him. He's miserable. He suddenly stopped yelling. His shoulders slumped. Mom, he said quietly. Facing her, his voice cracked. Why are you being so mean? Mom scrunched her eyes shut and let out a shaky breath. She shook her head slowly, stepping closer and put her hands on Brian's shoulders. I hate skunks, but it's not really about that. It's everything lately. She rubbed her forehead with her fist. You just see what happened. I blew up at you, and what good did that do? One person explodes and the other explodes. All anger does is breed more anger. Scenes of the riot, anger boiling over a pot of scalding water, filled Brian's mind. He looked at his mother's eyes, which had lost the craziness he had just seen a second earlier. Anger is a choice, she stated, her palms up. There was so much he didn't understand. Was anger really a choice, or was it something controlled by a person, like an instinct? From the other side of the glass, Gretzky whined. Brian looked at him. Maybe Gretzky had acted out of instinct, going after the skunk. But if he had any brains in his head at all, he wouldn't go after another one. Brian swallowed, tasting the skunk's offensive odor. Mom glanced at Gretzky and shook her head. I don't know what we're going to do with him, she said, walking back toward the kitchen and grabbing her jacket from the peg by the door. Right now, I can't handle it. It's time for me to take a walk. Her voice wavered. I need to burn off some of this stress. Mom, Brian asked. She turned. Got any tomato juice? That's what Sheenans used for their dog last fall. Downstairs, she said, in the pantry. Flush his eyes with water, too. Thanks, Bri. I don't know what I would do without you. For a second, the corners of her mouth lifted, and then she was gone. Brian put on the blue rain suit he had used only once for fishing, and then went to rescue Gretzky, who now sat with his nose against the sliding glass door whining. It was worse than the smell of the mill, worse than anything he could remember. Here goes, he muttered. Gretzky wagged his stub tail. Arr, he moaned as Brian slid the door open. You really, really, really stink. He held his breath and scooped Gretzky's sausage body under his arm. When his lungs started to burn, he let out air in a blast. Then he inhaled deeply again. Come on, brainless, he said. Let's get you cleaned up. Gagging and choking, Brian carried Gretzky quickly down to the basement and set him in the white laundry tub. He wet Gretzky down with warm water, lathered him in tomato sauce, and scrubbed him till he was completely red, except for his black button nose. Did Dad have a choice about anger? Could Dad have decided to stay home this morning? As Gretzky licked the tomato juice, Brian sank his fingers into the dog's coat, working the cool red liquid through the dense gray fur and down the dog's skin. The picture of his father torching the curtain, the flames jumping out of control, haunted him. How could he? How could his father actually destroy someone else's home? It went against everything he ever taught Brian about being good and bad, right and wrong. He'd also taught Brian to stand up for himself and to make decisions, to be a leader. So now what was Brian supposed to do? If he didn't turn the videotape in, there might not be any evidence against the other men. If he turned it in, he'd be going against his own father. His stomach twisted. It would never be the same between them again. Gretzky suddenly shook his coat, splattering tomato juice all over Brian's rain suit. Thanks, Brian rasped. I doubt Chelsea would call you adorable now. Gretzky's swollen eyes streamed. He whined. From above the sink, Brian grabbed an orange plastic cup and filled it with cool water, and he held the dog's muzzle firmly upward and then carefully poured a gentle trickle of water into Gretzky's eyes. The schnauzer blinked and struggled. Hold still, Brian said. I'm only trying to help. If Dad had a choice about anger, about getting involved, then he probably should have made it long before the riot ever started. I know one thing, Gretzky, Brian said, his nostrils pinched painfully by the odor. Going after a skunk was a really bad choice.